Hi and welcome to our Conceive Baby discussion today, or tonight as it happens to be here in Melbourne, Australia. Today we're going to be delving into the side of fertility that we really don't talk about, the side that we tend to really hide behind a brave face. So today we're going to be breaking down some of those walls and hearing a very inspiring personal journey of fertility. But firstly, if you haven't joined us before, my name's Tasha Jennings, founder of Conceive Baby. I'm a naturopath, nutritionist, natural fertility specialist, and author of The Vitamins Guide and The Fertility Diet. And if you are already part of the Conceive Baby community, you would know I am passionate about empowering women and couples to really take control of their fertility through access to qualified, trusted advice and support. And today I'm speaking with someone who shares a similar mission. Jessica Hepburn is one of the leading patient voices on fertility, infertility, and assisted conception. She is the author of 2 books, The Pursuit of Motherhood and 21 Miles, Swimming in Search of the Meaning of Motherhood, which is launching in just a few weeks. In 2016, following her 10-year tenure as the executive director of the Lyric Theatre in Hammersmith in London, she founded Fertility Fest, which is the world's first arts festival dedicated to fertility, infertility, modern families, and the science of making babies. Now, the second edition of the festival will be held at London's Bush Theatre from the 8th to 13th of May, so only a few weeks away. So I appreciate Jessica taking the time out of her busy schedule to speak with us today. Welcome, Jessica.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. That's such a lovely introduction.
You really are, achieving amazing things. I mean, Fertility Fest is an achievement in itself. And we were just speaking off air. I hope you don't mind I mention, but you have just been made Woman of the Week in the Stylist magazine, Visible Women's series.
Yeah, UK magazine. It's a bit overwhelming, really. It's a real honour. Yeah,
so that's in honour of, I guess, the 100 years of Vogue, was it? To celebrate women who are really making a difference.
Yeah, that's right. They're doing a campaign where they're choosing a different woman over each week of this year, because it's the 100-year anniversary of women getting the vote in the UK. And they're selecting women that they feel are doing work that's sort of changing the world for the better. And it's, as I said, it's such an honour to be chosen, but also really exciting because it feels like these conversations about fertility and infertility that really started when my first book came out 4 years ago are getting into the mainstream now, and that's what they need to do. So, yeah, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, well, congratulations. There's people like yourself that are really, breaking down the barriers for the next generation, coming through to hopefully not have the struggles that we have had. So I guess, to just start from the start, tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did it all begin?
Yeah, well, I would say that my journey started when I was 34, and I just actually taken over running the Lyric Hammersmith, the theatre that you mentioned I was chief executive of, and I'd spent all my 20s, pursuing my career, climbing the career ladder, had an amazing job. I'd met the man that I wanted to have a family with, and we started trying to conceive them. And I genuinely thought, Tasha, it was the sort of perfect age, and I had done everything right and I could have it all. After about a year of trying to conceive naturally, nothing was happening. And I think that's the first surprise or shock that people get, because they think that as soon as you throw away the contraception, you're going to get pregnant. Because, we were talking about this off air, weren't we, that's what we're told as young people, and there's so much focus as young people on how not to get pregnant, but it wasn't happening. And after about a year, we went to a fertility clinic and had a routine round of fertility tests, and we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility, which is a really frustrating diagnosis because, of course, it isn't a diagnosis. The doctors have no idea what's going on, and everything looks like it's in working order. And that was the start of what became a decade-long struggle to conceive that involved multiple rounds of IVF, 11 rounds of IVF, I think you mentioned, which, you know, I know is very much at the extreme end of the spectrum. But we had the really, you know, sad situation, which is that we did seem to be able to create perfect embryos. I did seem to be able to get pregnant, and I had multiple miscarriages and then also an ectopic pregnancy that was discovered very late, at 3 months in my abdomen, which was almost a life-threatening situation. So, but doctors, because we could seem to get pregnant, all the doctors we saw, and, you know, I went to many fertility clinics in my bid to, you know, find a solution and find the baby and get the baby that I dreamed of. They thought that this was all a very good signs that, you know, it would eventually happen. But 11 rounds of IVF later, still no baby.
Yeah, it's such a difficult story. And as we were saying, yeah, off air, that you are assumed that once you throw away the contraception, that pregnancy will be easy. I think we get told through our teens, through our 20s, it's a really, you know, obviously a valid message, but still it's a very strong message of how important it is not to get pregnant. Yeah. So we just assume that, okay, the flip side, pregnancy should be easy, shouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know, like you kindly shared a bit of your own story with me. And, you know, I think that's another thing that, like, women aren't taught about what's normal and what's not normal in their bodies, or how to protect their reproductive health. And so, you know, then when things aren't working, and certainly if you come to trying to conceive in the latter part of your fertility life cycle, which we know is what many women are doing now, because there is this focus on going to university, getting on the career ladder in your 20s, but also, you know, certainly in the UK, like many young people in their 20s, they're not able to start families. They haven't got secure jobs. They can't get on the housing ladder. So, you know, there are all sorts of reasons why people are leaving it later. And you know, the average age of first-time motherhood is increasing. Yeah. But alongside that, there's an exponential growth in the number of people who are struggling to conceive. And the majority of people, certainly in the UK, going through IVF are over the age of 35. And what we know is that over the age of 35, your fertility starts to drop massively. And given that, you know, also the success rates around IVF is still only running around 25% of all cycles being successful, you know, you are taking on a lottery here. And I just think that none of those things are really fully understood by young people, and that's something that I really want to change. Because, you know, as a sort of final comment on that, because if you ask, I mean, we may talk about this in this conversation, I'm doing a lot of work with young people, and if you ask a group of teenage girls whether they want to be parents in the future, 99% of them will say that they do. But we know that the number of women entering their 40s now, childless, is running at 20%, which is double our parents' generation. So there's a disconnect there between what women say they want and what they're getting. And I believe that this is due to a whole range of reasons, some societal, but also lack of education.
I absolutely agree with you. It's societal and education. We are obviously waiting longer as women. You know, we have more education. We are climbing the career ladder. And also, as you said, just, you know, reasons for not being able to afford housing, etc. There are reasons why we're waiting longer. But we're also, if you ask, you know, a 16-year-old if they want to be a mum, then I'm sure they'd say, yeah, sure, I definitely do one day. But they're actually biologically prime right now. But these days, it's not something we would even consider in our prime. Making years. And as you said, I mean, I see a lot of patients, I know we're discussing this off air, who prescribe the pill because they have some serious hormonal issues around their cycle, and they get pain, they may have really heavy bleeding. And instead of actually dealing with the situation and overcoming the hormonal issue, they're prescribed the pill, which they take it does work very well. But then, of course, you know, when they get in their 30s, perhaps, you know, around 35, I've seen women, okay, come off the pill, all those symptoms come back again. They have not had any education around their cycle. They've actually never really known a cycle. And some women have even skipped their bleeding throughout this time because they were told that was okay, with totally unaware of what they're doing to their own fertility. And I know we were talking about my journey as well, and I found it really difficult. I was quite cross with myself in that I'm a healthcare professional. I was a naturopath at the time. I wasn't specialising in fertility. But I understood the menstrual cycle, I understood the textbook cycle, but I personally had no idea what was going on inside my own body. And I thought, if I don't know that, how many other people are out there? And obviously yourself in a similar situation. You just assume everyone has babies, don't they?
Yeah. And I mean, also that really reminds me of a wonderful woman who's in my festival called Izzy Judd, who is a musician herself and married to Harry Judd from the band McFly. And she's written this beautiful book called Dare to Dream about their story. I mean, I really applaud her because, you know, they're in the public eye and they at a very high level. And she tells exactly the same story of having very difficult periods as a young woman and as a teenager being put on the pill. And then when she and Harry got married and started to conceive, and she was young, you know, she was in her sort of mid to late 20s. Yeah. She suddenly discovered that it wasn't working and that the pill had been masking these other problems. And so, I think, I think there are so many aspects to this, and age-related fertility is one. But yes, absolutely, sort of understanding about your fertility health as a woman is also critical to this picture.
Yes, and there is a lack thereof. There's so much education to the latter. So it's great to see, as you said, these people sharing their stories yourself, and obviously you have other high-profile people sharing their stories. What really inspired you to share your story? Because as we talked about, a lot of people don't. It is a bit behind closed doors, possibly ashamed in some ways. So what inspired you to share your story through your book?
Yeah, well, I mean, and also we can talk a bit about the shame, because I think shame is a really good word to describe what people go through when they struggle with infertility, and it's one of the reasons why I think people are very secretive about what they're going through. And I have to say, Tasha, I really was, for years, I did not tell anybody what I was going through, even my closest family and friends, let alone my work colleagues. And I would, through my multiple cycles of IVF, I don't know if you know, but generally egg collection is very early in the morning in a clinic. And, I would go in, have a general anesthetic, have my eggs collected, and I would be back at my desk at work, within a couple of hours, and no one knew what I had just been through. So I was really secretive, and things started to sort of really shift for me around 40. 40 was a really significant sort of moment. I think it is for many women, because it's the cusp of going from your 30s, where you still feel almost young, to your 40s. It's particularly in terms of sort of your reproduction was very significant for me. And it also coincided with me just around about that time going through my ectopic pregnancy and then a miscarriage. I started writing about what I was going through, initially also in secret. It was very much to begin with a therapeutic process. And I genuinely thought I was going to write myself to a happy ending, because if anyone reads my first book or even now reads my second book, which is just about to come out, as you said, 43 was always a really sort of important number for me. I had I went out with a friend who said to me, Jessica, it's all about the number 43. If you don't get pregnant by the time you're 43, then you can just go on and get on with the rest of your life. So I'd always had this number of 43, which of course is when the IVF success rates, whenever they're published, they always drop through the floor at 43 to 1 or 2% success. And so I thought, well, I'm going to carry on this journey until I'm 43. And I started writing around about 40 and thought I was going to write this book to a miracle happy ending. And in fact, that didn't happen. The book sort of ends not, on a cliffhanger in a way, in the sense that the journey isn't over, but there isn't a miracle baby at that point. And then I had a big decision once I'd written the book about what to do with it. And I had also discovered this love of writing, and I was really conscious at the time there wasn't enough literature around this in the sort of wider world, and I was sort of in a way writing the book I wanted to read, and I thought, well, I wanted people to read it. I guess I think anyone who loves writing discovers a love of writing, as I did, surprisingly through this, ultimately wants to be read as well. So I then had this big decision about whether I was going to publish it as myself or publish it anonymously. My editor, who's now my agent, said to me, she did a Google search. I was going to call myself Jessica Harper, which Harper was my grandmother's maiden name. Yeah. And she did this Google search, and she said, there's a Jessica Harper that's defrauded Lloyds Bank, which is a big bank in the UK, of £1 million. I don't think you should call yourself Jessica Harper. Glad
for Google.
Yeah. So that was a really seminal moment, because I just thought, right, okay, I'm going to be Jessica Hepburn. And the other thing I realized at that point is that I've always had a bit of a campaigning spirit in me. And there are things that I wanted to change about the world of fertility. At the time, there were some very particular things about, and still are, about the environment of fertility clinics, the emotional care. There's so much focus on clinical treatment and not enough focus, I believe, around what you're going through psychologically as a fertility patient. I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to be a voice, a sort of authentic voice, if I was not me. So I decided to publish it as me, and that was it changed my life, I guess. 4 years later, that was 4 years ago that the book came out, and here I am now, like you say, Women of the Week in Stylist magazine. Yeah. I mean, it's been an incredible journey. That wouldn't have happened 4 years ago. That wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
No way.
But sort of, you've almost fallen into this career path in a way. It's chosen you rather than the other way around.
Oh, it's chosen me. It's chosen me. And of course, I would take the family, hands down, that I haven't got.
Yeah.
But I do have a sort of philosophy that you have to take the bad stuff in your life, and this is something that I really explore in my second book. You have to take the bad stuff in your life and turn it into good stuff. And we all have bad stuff. And my bad thing is that I went through 11 rounds of unsuccessful IVF and haven't been able to have a biological baby with the man that I love. But and I'm never going to get over that. I'm going to carry that with me for the rest of my life. But it doesn't mean that for this tiny amount of time that I'm in this wonderful world, that I can't have other amazing experiences, and also try and create a different sort of legacy. And obviously for me, it's about helping more people to have the families that they want to have, because I think this is a human desire to have a family.
That's
and
I
want to help people have that.
Yeah. Congratulations on achieving that and what you've done for other people, because you really are affecting change, which is what we spoke about, is what we both really want, affecting more change, more education for people who are around their fertility cycle. Because as you said, 11 rounds of IVF, we do see that as the magic bullet. I think people think, okay, my fertility's I'm getting older, my fertility I know declines, I think, but there's always IVF. And I think that's seen as we spoke about the statistics on that, it's not the magic bullet that is, that people are led to believe. So it was not something that you can rely on. Okay, if I can't get conceived naturally, then I'll just go through IVF. And obviously you're a testament to that as well. And it's just heartbreaking. As you said, the emotional support is not there as much. I obviously don't know comparatively to the UK, but Australia here as well, it is focused on the clinical side of it, and it generally is. Okay, we'll just try again. We'll try again, and that takes a toll.
It does. And I think one of the things I really want to stress is that I am not against IVF, because IVF is a miracle science. We are celebrating the 40th anniversary of IVF this year. It was invented in the UK by Robert Edwards and Patrick Steptoe. It's, like when we think about, I mean, the history of this technology is extraordinary, because they were denigrated when they invented it, and of course now over 6 million babies have been born worldwide. So I think it's really important. I always want to say that IVF is an extraordinarily wonderful thing, and it gives many people the families they dream of. But I think it's really also important that people understand the realities of going through IVF. Initially, the first thing, exactly as you said, there's a tendency to believe that it's a magic bullet. When you said that, I just thought, I was remembering that I was in the hairdressers a couple of months ago, and my lovely hairdresser, who's in her mid-30s, and she's in a nice relationship, we were talking about babies, and she said, oh well, and I said, you need to think about it, because I do sort of, I don't want anyone to do what they don't want to do, but I just want to highlight to people that if you do want a family and you're in your mid-30s, it's worth thinking about it. And so she said, yeah, but I can always do IVF. I can always do IVF. And at that point, my heart sinks, because as I said earlier in this interview, certainly in the UK at the moment, and really the statistics are roughly the same worldwide. We're running at 75% of each cycle failing. So only 25% of cycles work. I mean, that's just one thing that everybody needs to know. And what that means is that generally, you need to go through several cycles before you have success. So you may be one of the few lucky ones that gets pregnant first time, and you may be one of the really unlucky ones like me that goes through 11 cycles and is unsuccessful. And that is equally rare. Like what I have been through, given that I had unexplained infertility, I created perfect embryos, my situation is very, very rare. But most people are somewhere around about the middle. They're somewhere between 3 and 5 cycles. And certainly if you're prepared to consider things like egg donation or even surrogacy, the chances of having a baby through one of these technologies, can be quite high. But you're often on that journey for a long time. It costs a lot of money, and the emotional impact of it, I think people are just not prepared or supported with.
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to the education. IVF is absolutely amazing. I work with some, wonderful IVF specialists who are achieving amazing things, but it is almost too amazing. We see all these stories all over the headlines. We see the amazing effects that IVF is having, the baby born in their 40s, that it is just assumed, exactly as your hairdresser said, is what I hear, is, there's always IVF, and it's pretty much, well, if I can't conceive, it doesn't matter. There's always IVF. And the reality is, IVF was meant to treat a specific type of infertility. It's not the magic bullet for everybody. So I think there's just, again, it's just the awareness and the education. As you said, there's a lot of other options. I know on this podcast and webinar series, we've discussed egg donation, surrogacy, egg freezing. We've discussed all of the options, but by the time you get to that point, as you said, you may have been through so much emotionally, years, the aging. It really is such a process that by the time you are educated on these other options, it's exhausting. And if you could speed that up and fast track that process a little by getting this kind of information out to people who need it when they need it.
And I think that is really critical, because I think if you can have these sorts of conversations earlier on, then you can be prepared, for what might happen, or you can plan, that you might decide. I mean, I think egg freezing, I mean, you say you've discussed it on the webinar previously, I mean, what the thing we know about egg freezing is, the technology is very, very new. You know, we've been freezing embryos for quite a long time, but we haven't been freezing eggs for as long. And eggs are much more fragile than embryos. So, you know, like, I think people don't understand that. And then the second thing is that, like, the majority, there's been a huge increase in egg freezing, but the majority of people freezing eggs at the moment are in their late 30s, and generally it's because they're not in a situation, often they haven't met the right partner to have a baby with. And what we know is that post 35, your fertility is declining massively. So you've got a situation where this technology which is an extraordinary technology, and maybe the future. It may be the future. I mean, I was at a brilliant talk that a fertility professional was talking at, that said, you know, actually, if egg freezing could become really cost effective, you know, almost like contraception, you know, the cost of things like contraception, you know, which are now very low, and really, you know, reasonable, and you could do it in your early 20s. And obviously we would need to, I don't know what the situation is in Australia, but we would need to have a law change over here, because at the moment, if you are freezing your eggs for social reasons, i.e. not because you've got cancer and you're doing it because you're about to undergo chemotherapy, that's a different matter in the UK. But if you're freezing your eggs for social reasons, because you want to preserve your fertility, because of your lifestyle, you can only keep those eggs on ice for 10 years. So at the moment, and again, these are the sort of conversations we need to have, because the egg freezing might be, you know, a possibility for women in the future to have everything. But at the moment, it looks like, you know, unless there's a change in our biology, the ideal would be to be freezing your eggs in your early 20s, to be keeping them for longer than 10 years, because you might not be ready in 10 years. And also to recognize that the science probably is not going to change in our lifetime to ensure 100% success. We're probably still going to be running, you know, if we're lucky, you know, I think if you're under 35, the success rate is 30 to 35%. I mean, I feel really bad quoting all these statistics, because, you know, statistics, you know, like what, but I just spend so much time with fertility experts these days. But I suppose that, you know, just the important thing to say is that, you know, it's not, there's probably in none of our lifetimes will we create a science that is 100% going to guarantee you a baby. And you know, and that's one of the, you know, things that I've really come to terms with. And again, you know, in my book, it's about me sort of, you know, having a conversation with nature, because ultimately nature is in control of this. You know, no doctor, no, it doesn't matter how hard you work at it, how much money you give it, you know, there is something beyond you that's out of your control. But so I think that all these conversations need to be had in more, you know, useful ways for the world.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it comes down to. There's so many conversations to be had around, as you said, the egg freezing. The science is just amazing. And I did one on egg donation as well, and all the legalities around that, and also the legislation. As you said, there is so much to understand that if you are in that world, if you're struggling to fall pregnant, then you are faced with all of these new technologies, new science, new legislations. It's extremely overwhelming. So I think, you know, this is why I think things like Fertility Fest, which is what you have brought to us, are such a wonderful way to have these conversations. But in a, I wouldn't say a celebration, but it's leading towards that. It's a much nicer way to have these conversations. So, you know, what made you develop Fertility Fest and come up with the, I guess, the conception of it?
Well, I do you know what? I love the way that you called it a celebration, and then you were like sort of tentative, because it is a strange title in a way, you know, and because we called it Fertility Fest, and it sounds like it's some sort of party, you know, and yet actually a lot of you know, the core audience are people who are struggling to conceive, or going on a complex journey to conceive. They might not be struggling to conceive because, of course, you know, there are more and more same-sex couples or single people who are using reproductive science to have families, and they might not have any form of fertility issue. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the science will work for them first time, even if they've got no fertility issues. So, but you know, there is, and we're not afraid of exploring those difficult emotions. That's very much what, you know, the festival is. And you know, there are many sort of trade shows, and in fact I am the host of the Q&A stage at the biggest trade show in the UK, which is a marvelous thing, which is called the Fertility Show, which is about if you want to go and, you know, choose a clinic and look at all the sort of options for, you know, for clinical support. And but our festival is about the emotional journey. Yeah. It's about the philosophical and societal issues around this, and I suppose Fest, because I don't want it to, I want it to be a more sort of open, honest sort of conversation, that whatever because everybody has a fertility story. I mean, we were talking about this earlier before we went live, you know, everybody has a fertility story, and, you know, there is sadness there, but whatever your story is, the important thing is that a fulfilling life comes out of it, you know, which may be a life without children, or it may be a life with children, but that you've had to take a different route, which is, you know, adoption or fostering or donation or surrogacy, or, you know, but that we can sort of have a sort of a conversation that doesn't have to feel, that allows for emotions and sadness, but also doesn't sort of become, it doesn't become a stigmatized conversation or a secret conversation that is being had over there by some sad people who haven't been able to get what, you know, what normal people, you know, worthy people get, you know, which is this thing which we all think is a human, you know, right, which is to have our own babies. So yeah, so that's sort of what we're trying to do with it. And the sort of critical thing about it is it's anchored by artists. So it's about artists and their work around this multifaceted subject in dialogue with fertility professionals and patients and the public. And artists, because, you know, obviously I come from a creative background, running a theatre, and I've become a writer myself now. But I just think that they are brilliant at exploring the emotions and stories and issues, and also it creates a real level playing field with the fertility professionals, because sort of in the surgery, you know, as patients, we're often very vulnerable, because this doctor holds our happiness in their hands. But and also to some extent in the trade shows, you know, when we're going around and thinking which clinic, which doctor is going to give me this thing. But within the Fertility Fest environment, then we're all on a level playing field. And to some extent, the doctors are on the back foot, because it's not the science world, it's the arts world. And there's just something about that alchemy that works really, really well. And we've only done it once. I mean, like, we did it in a really small way in 2016, and like everybody said, like, you've got to bring it back. And then we spent the whole year of last year securing funding and venues, and yeah, it's coming back in May. It's going to be a week-long program, 150 artists and experts, 40 events. It's madness.
It's wonderful. It's just such a safe space you've created, I think, to have those conversations, because I think, as we've discussed earlier, these are things that we didn't even talk about, you know, with close friends or even a lot of family members. So this is lovely that you've created. I think the Fertility Fest, as I said, you know, the celebration term wasn't quite right, but it is a lovely safe place.
It is. Yeah, no, it's perfect. Yeah, and but also, you know, what's beautiful, Tasha, because we only met briefly online yesterday for the first time, but it really feels that you sort of understand. And I do think there is something wonderful about like people who are, I was having this conversation with someone earlier today about sort of people in this field, you know, they generally like really good people, and they've struggled and they've been through pain, and I think you describing it as a safe space, which, you know, you've chosen, you know, take the words out of my mouth, because that's exactly what it is. It's a space where you can come in and you're with people who understand. It's like walking into a big hug, hopefully. And yeah, and also, you know, the really important thing to stress is that I am a co-director with a wonderful woman called Gabby Vautier, who is the other side of fertility treatment to me. So she has IVF toddler twins after 4 rounds of treatment. And I always say when we give speeches, you know, that we share more than what separates us, because even though she got her miracle family and I didn't, we absolutely both know what it is to struggle to conceive, and she went through 4 rounds of IVF, and so we're much more, you know, similar in a way than me with someone who chose not to have children, who actively never wanted to have children in their life, you know, who I'm tended to be sort of lumped with because I haven't got children. But actually, no, I'm much more like mothers, because that's what I wanted to be. And, you know, and in some respects, I am a mother to the 11 rounds of IVF that I went through to conceive the child that never ended up being here, you know. But that metaphorical child is there somewhere in the background, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Because I mean, anyone who's been through this journey, I think anyone who's listening who's been through the journey would resonate with that as well. Because even though, as you said, you're a co-founder, obviously she's now has her children, but she didn't know when that was going to happen. So you were both going through the same things, because I think with this, you don't know, is it going to be 18 months, 12 months, 6 years? There is no finite number to it. And when you're in that, no matter how long or short that time is, it's painful. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. The hell of it is you don't know how it's going to end when you're in it. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know how it's going to end. And crucially, you don't know if you're going to be okay if it doesn't end the way that you want it to.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that is really hard to live with. Because you feel as if, well, if I can't get this thing, well, do I even want this life? You know, because I do think also having a family, and of course there are many ways to have a family and many types of family, but it is a human instinct, you know, in the same way as it is to reproduce, you know, but to be in a sort of clan, you know, with people that are related to you, you know, is something. And, you know, I think human connection is really important to human happiness. And, you know, not always comes through family. I think human connection can come in different ways, but I think family is often a good shortcut to that. And that's why it's so important. And if you don't get it like that, then you have to really work hard to get it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that, like, what you've created is giving people a space to do that, to make those connections, to be in a safe space, to talk about these issues without feeling the shame and the guilt that often goes with it. And I think, you know, both of us have come through these things. My journey was obviously relatively short. I don't like to talk about mine in relation to it too much, because I now have my beautiful children, similar to your co-director. And I guess that's why I became passionate about, you know, conceive baby and bringing, you know, experts to people, because I was a naturopath, my husband was a cardiologist. We had all the information at our fingertips to be able to, you know, get ourselves into a position where we were able to conceive. So our journey was relatively short because we had access to all of that. So I became passionate about giving other people access to all of that, same as you have through your journey through the arts. So when are you coming to Australia is all I want to know.
Wow, it's funny that you asked that, because we've had a lot of interest in Fertility Fest and the work, and there is a tiny possibility that we might be going international, and who knows, we may even be coming to Australia.
That sounds optimistic. I think I'm going to hang on to that.
Who knows? Watch this space. You will be the first to know, I promise.
Definitely. Keep us posted. It sounds really exciting, and congratulations on all the exciting things you're doing. The Fertility Fest, your book launch is happening, your Woman of the Week in Stylist magazine. It's just, congratulations on everything you've achieved for the industry, for yourself personally, and for other people who are struggling. And look, is there anything you'd like to leave anyone with who may be struggling with a similar thing tonight? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I would just say, when you were just giving that little roll call of things, I thought infertility could be that successful. And all I would say is that, like, the really important thing is that I think one of the things that you feel when you're on this journey is that you're alone. And you're not alone. This is happening in every town, in every country throughout the world. Infertility is affecting, or subfertility is affecting 1 in 6 people, and this is normal. And just the fact that it's not understood or talked about enough yet is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to go through. And the other thing is that, I suppose my final sort of message would be that there are many routes to parenthood, and if the route that you're on doesn't work, there are other routes to look at, including mothering in the world without being a parent. But I also genuinely think, but you have to do the work around this, because obviously this is a pain that is deep, is that you can have a fulfilling life without children too. Yeah. And life is short. And who knows, like in 100 years' time, Tasha, no one's going to know whether we were parents or not. You or I were parents or not, Yeah. So it's what we do in the world, and the impact that we make on other people in the world, whether they're our children or not, that is our ultimate legacy. And so that's what I would say.
And you certainly are achieving all that and more. You're making an incredible difference. It's lovely to see you being applauded for that and getting this award. So yeah, do send over the interview. I'd love to see the article when it's published. So thank you so much for being with us tonight here in Melbourne, obviously 11 a.m. over there in the UK. But I know this is a very busy time for you, particularly because Fertility Fest is coming up. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak to us today. So
it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So thank you. So bye. So thanks all for joining us. It's been such a wonderful to have this discussion. I know this is probably a deviation from some of the more clinical discussions that we have, but it's just great to know that there are other people out there, and things like Fertility Fest, which is hopefully coming to Australia as well, that there are out there to support you through this journey where it often is lacking, so you aren't alone. And if you did want more information on alternative pathways to pregnancy, obviously ways to support your journey, improve your egg health, improve your uterine health, or anything to do with fertility, jump over to conceivebaby.com.au, where you can listen to the podcast and the webinar series. Or if you're looking for more personal support through your fertility journey, jump over to tashajennings.com.au, where we can help you on your personal journey. I look forward to joining you next time. See you for now.